Welcome to another exciting episode of Peak for Society. I have a very special guest today. She comes from all the way from the land of TikTok. The one, the only Joy's Family Barbecue. Joy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here.
So I invited Joy to come to the studio because we all know how I say one kind act can save somebody's life. Joy is the prime example of what I mean by that. Joy, when you run into her, is probably the most positive person you've ever met. So Joy, why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about yourself?
So I started TikTok probably only less than a year ago. This week is actually February 4th, and think I started about a year ago tomorrow. So before that, I'd never posted, never been. I was a doom scroller, and that was it. But at the end of the day, TikTok became kind of my world this last year. And if you're going to spend that much time doing something, you might as well make the best of it, do it well, and make it worth your time. And that has been the people that I've gotten to know on there, and they've made it worth it. I love hanging out with our Joy's Family Barbecue at night.
Yeah, Joy is probably the greatest and probably my biggest supporter when it comes to TikTok. A lot of times when I meet it with her, she's always very engaging. When you run into her, very excited to see you. Very great intros and things like that too. She's always sending people my way. In fact, Joy is the reason that Marin had come visit us here at the studio. So it's been great like that too. And then other people from there have come from that room saying the same thing. So Joy, why are you so positive though? Like, is it just how you've always been? Is it just, things like that? I figure like maybe we'll take a deep dive into who Joy is a little bit without going into it completely.
Quite frankly, I was raised by good parents. First of all, I will say I'm very blessed and very thankful for who I had as parents. My mom currently lives in Missouri. She's moved away in the last 5 years. I still go see her at least once a year. And my dad passed away about 10 years ago. I do accredit a major portion, if not all, of who I am today to how they raised us, the fact that they made a decision for their lives. Literally back in 2001, the week of the World Trade Towers, we found the Lord, we found a church, we found a peace that passes all understanding when it was a dark time prior to that in my parents' life. And as a kid, you don't know that. As a kid, you are going through and seeing and feeling the tensity sometimes in the family, but not understanding what's going on. But at a time when my parents were dealing with a lot moving changes, this was prior to the 7-8 crash and the housing development and et cetera. When all of this happened, the Lord lines things up perfectly to where he put a flyer on our door for a church literally just starting 3 months from the time that we moved to a new city. And so we were like, you know what? Let's try it out. And because of that one decision that they made, our entire lives, I 100% believe that our entire lives are in a directly opposite path from where they would have been. And so eventually my dad became a pastor and started a church up. And he was doing that for about 6 years. So becoming a what we call a PK in the Christian world, or a pastor's kid, basically has you in the limelight without being in a limelight. It's not like you're anything
Hmm.
famous or anything like that, but people's eyes are on you, right? But at the end of the day, my dad had a true love for the Lord and a true joy for the Lord that it was contagious. It was infectious. It was something that even at his funeral, there was over 200 people that all said unanimously the same thing. He made you feel like the only person in the room, always, even if there was that many people. So I accredit it to that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that though. I feel like he rubs off on you that way too. Because when you come in and someone's in there and you highlight them and you're just overjoyed to tell them, and like the thing is, I love that you're religious, but at the same time you don't force feed it to people though. I think that was my worst experience in the beginning with religion was that the way people presented it to me, it was felt like it was like force fed you almost. So I love the fact the way that you are a woman of faith, but you're not like sitting there just cramming it down people's throat because I feel like people take it the wrong way. Like faith doesn't have to be like that. You of course you got those people that are overzealous, and you being the pastor's daughter, it's even more interesting because it's like, no one will ever even know. Like you're not like that. You're like you'll mention some things here and there, and stuff like that too. But it's not like you're like force feeding it to people. But that bubbly positivity, like I said though, you could say somebody's life and not even realize it. And I did that one time when I was struggling with some people, and I texted them randomly and said, "Listen, hey, listen, you saved a life and you didn't even know it." Just being in the presence of people like that. I know there's a girl in my family that's like that too. When I was struggling, she didn't even realize it that I just need that warm energy and that presence and everything like that. And you helped a little bit too because like when I met you the first time, I was like, "Who the hell is this lady here?" Like I ran into you, and I kept coming back, and it was like something kept drawing me to come back in there. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep coming back, checking in here. I kind of like her energy, and then it just kept going, and then your positivity, it just kept radiating off the screen. I was like, dude, this is just good, and And, being on TikTok for only a year, it's interesting because with TikTok, it could be good or bad experience for a lot of people. I think like a lot of people don't realize that, you have to like with any social media site, you have to use it to your advantage. So if you think about it, because like that's how I've met a lot of mental health advocates. Is like I was bouncing around. Actually, the guest we had yesterday, she has a room and she's about as positive as you, but probably not. It's not as exciting as a family barbecue. I'll be honest with you. She hypes up a bit. She's gonna get there, but I still think that's my new home is the family barbecue because I like the fact, the sense that you make everyone feel welcome at the same time. And you, like I said, you just don't realize that, and you're like, well, I don't know much about mental health. Like, you may know more than you realize. You never know that, like, somebody coming in there, that could be the one dividing moment. They're like, okay, well, I'm feeling terrible. I come in here, they meet you, and then they're like, okay, well, this person's really positive, and you're always focusing on, new people coming in and making them feel welcome, and for all you know, you're saving their life and not even realizing it.
If I can be used to reach one person, that would already be a huge blessing. But TikTok gives you a platform to where people can literally be in the room with you and you know it, and they can be in the hallway watching and you wouldn't. And I have had people reach out multiple different times to just say, I needed that tonight. And that honestly, that's the reason that I hop in because there are some nights when I don't even make a buck. And that's okay. When I first started this, I was doing digital marketing. I wasn't even doing a grow room. So it was totally different niche. But even with the money that I was making digital marketing, for some reason I felt called to change my niche entirely. And that's what I did back in May. And starting this, the positive feedback that has come from people, it's been like, okay, this TikTok world, it's my ministry. It's my
Yeah.
ministry. And I'm okay with that.
And
So
yeah, it's exactly like you're dating your dad's legacy, but you're doing it in your own way in the digital age now with all these different websites and different things. And I know you have kids, so what ages are they, if you don't mind me asking? We won't really say much else on that.
so I have an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 14-year-old. My 14-year-old is my only girl, and she's just started working.
So
Oh goodness.
let me ask you a question though. With the 14, do you worry about the state of the internet now? Like with the things that you see that she's seeing, are you very hands on with what she's looking at online these days?
So I'm going to be honest, really, with my kids growing up. So my kids are homeschooled.
Hmm.
That being said, all the way up until I want to say about a year, year and a half, I'm going to say a year ago, about a year ago was probably the first time devices were even allowed like, as a regular thing in my house.
Yeah.
Leading all the way up to that, my kids didn't have devices until their uncle decided to go ahead and get them all once, I think 2 years ago, but I didn't give it to them right away. They all got them for their birthday from their uncle. But that being said, their rule was 30 minutes on a Friday night they could play with their cousins and that's it. All the way up until about a year ago, which would have made them 10, 12, and 13 at the time. And so that being said, at that time, I started allowing it only because I knew they were playing silly things like Roblox, whatever, with their cousins. But what you don't see is even on things like Roblox,
Here we go.
my dear, there is so much craziness that happens on there as well. And until or unless you end up on the bad side of it, you don't know that, which we had a little experience with that back in June, and we immediately pulled back the reins. We pulled back the reins. So now the only time my daughter has anything, my son has anything, and even my little guy, like he's still a part of it, but he's so young. We pulled back so far that my daughter has to have a phone for her new job. She has to
Hmm.
have it because she takes attendance. She writes her notes. She's a gymnast coach. And so she's allowed to have her watch on her so we can contact her. And that's all it does is it texts or calls. And then she's allowed to have her phone with just that one app on it where she takes attendance at her work. So you don't know how much is out there until you've hit that experience. We knew what we had, right, at our age. But nowadays, we think we know. We don't know till we run into it. And having that experience last year was so eye opening that I was like, yep, this is why I don't do this. And we pulled back on all the devices and said, nope, it's not necessary. Devices aren't a pleasurable thing. They're a tool. The tool to be
Hmm.
used correctly. And
Hmm.
so we figured, you know what, the minds aren't fully developed at their preteen, early teen years. They don't need it, but we will eventually give it back to them slowly because when they start driving, you need it for, a tool again. But yeah, it's definitely an experience and we trust the Lord to lead us into discovering things early on before they become bigger problems. And that's what he's done so far. So thankfully. Yeah.
Joy, you already touched everything. I was already going to jump into a little bit. The Robloxing for sure, 100%. I was like, so you said Roblox, my heart stopped. I was like, oh my God, hopefully. And I've known somebody that had the same thing. Like their kid was typing the address, and I'm like, your kids over there giving out your home address to somebody, like I was telling the friend, I was like, she was like, hell no. I was like, "But I think you need to understand, like, and then a good friend of mine that was in a podcast looking through the glass, her son had run into the same issue. He was talking to somebody on the internet, like Megan's Missing. I don't know if you ever seen that movie that they were like talking about a lot of families members were showing people, which for the love of God, I don't know why you would show this to anybody under the age of 14 because it's not for them to watch. Like the rest of the movie, what happens afterwards, you don't have to show them this whole movie. Just the idea, the fact that this random person you don't know and you can't see in the camera is talking to you was the same scenario she ran into. And I was like, holy crap. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, there's an incident that happened. I was looking at my phone. I was like, okay, hey, all right, something may happen. Okay. So she started leading into it and started saying that. I'm like, the hell? I'm like, oh, hell no. Because I had that problem early on. My daughter, she was like 14 at the time. She's posting pictures. She had a towel picture. I was like, oh God, please no. You need to take that off the internet right now. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to take that down right now. But why, Dad? And it's like you have to have these conversations with them. Like, well, understand, sweetheart, that boys don't know how to act right. Is how I had to tell her. Well, boys don't know how to act right. And it's not just that; it's grown ass men that don't know how to act right. Because when we lead to that, it's like there's this internet post that irritated me recently over the last few months. This young lady was showing off her dress for homecoming or whatever she was doing for whatever school dance, and these guys are making these vulgar comments. And I'm like, you're old enough to be her dad, and you're saying, "Oh, that dress would look great on my floor." I almost died as a girl dad. I'm like, what the hell is this? Because now I have to worry about this crap on the internet. And my kids are very high tech these days. One of them likes to stream a lot of times, so she does a lot of game streaming. And, like that, and then my oldest one, she kinda like she was the one that got me into TikTok because I was like, I didn't even know anything what the hell it was until then. I was like, "What is TikTok?" So then I downloaded it, and I started really paying attention to what she's doing, and what she's posting is like, as a girl, it's like, "You need to stop. Like, I don't know where you think this is okay. I'm not sure what you're watching, but the fact that you're doing these things, you don't realize the message you're sending to people." And she's like,
Parental.
"Well, why, Dad?" And it's like you're having to explain to these guys, like, "Hey, listen, I understand you're just doing what your friends are doing, but I don't think you understand the message you're sending to the internet because not just the people in your age group that see this. There's grown people that see this that are very sick individuals that don't look at it from the same light that you're looking at. Oh, that's a cute little post you pic you're making or whatever. They're thinking of it in a different level. And having explained this to a 14-year-old and break it down for them to understand, it's the hardest thing ever. You would understand too. Because it's like But so hats off to you for limiting the devices. I think now more than ever, that'll be seen as like, oh, well, Joyce is being overbearing. No, no, Joy is being 100% correct. Like these internet things, the games these kids play online, the things that are getting said to these children in these internet lobbies it's just
Mhm.
horrendous. I've had a few incidents where I've had to step in and say something to a grown ass man. It's not even my kid. He told this kid to go off himself. Like you just told a 12, like this kid, it sounds like he's 12 or 14, he'll kill himself. I'm sure you feel great. Like I was literally bullying this guy. I'm like, well, hold up, chief. I'm like, you went and told the kid to go off himself? Does that make you feel good about yourself? Like I literally started messaging this guy and I was like, I don't know this kid, but it's like, bro, what if he wouldn't did that? Like, do you
Mhm.
think of the outcome of what's going to say to these kids? So Joy, hands off to you for limiting those devices because I don't blame you these days. So the scary things that are going on, especially the Roblox thing where the one guy was exposing it and they're like, well, cease and desist. Why? Because we're pointing out the fact that predators are hiding in your app and this is a kid's game. It's disgusting.
Yep. It is disgusting, and quite frankly, that's not the only game out there. There's, Minecraft
Hmm.
and all these other
Yeah.
things that you think it's just the one thing. It's not isolated. It's everywhere. And if our generation's biggest issue was sending a single picture to a friend and then it getting away to anyone else in the school and people were still, committing suicide back in our day, can you imagine what it is now with AI and being able to take a picture and make it look like they're saying or doing other things that they weren't even in that? No, absolutely not. That's just it, everyone is within their own rights as a parent to make those decisions for their kids. I just take a more active approach in openly stating, like, no, thank you, not for me, not for my kids. So
Like I
I'm
said,
okay
hats
with that.
off to you though, because it's the suicide rates in boys 10 to 14 are now the second highest most rate, and it's gone up. In teenagers too, right in your daughter's range in that area and up are now going up as numbers, and it's sickening because the fact that if you look at the current rates, it was 80% last year were men, and the fact was like not to say discredit women in this conversation, but it's men don't talk enough about it, and then on the flip side, it's females did talk more about it, but they were less succeeding, but men were succeeding more. But it's not to say that either side is more, but it's still a frightening number at 80%. And that's the reason that a lot of them, and in the young age of boys, 10 to 14 is going up because exactly that. There's digital bullying, everything else. You have all these different sites and all this information, all this crazy stuff. Chat GPT was another thing where they had like the one little boy who was 13 ended up killing himself because it was like, well, hey, listen, oh, you seem like you're having suicidal thoughts, or it was starting to lead him on how to do it, gave him exact instructions on different ways to do it. And I'm like, what the hell? It's like, and then they're blaming ChatGPT, which I mean, I get what they're looking at, but ChatGPT didn't think about that because, like, who the hell's out there using this as their therapist? Well, here comes TikTok. Well, ChatGPT is my new therapist. Please, God, stop doing that. Don't do that. Don't, no, no, stop, please. It's the Tide Pods. Then it was ChatGPT's my thing, and then it was like the ice bucket challenge. Okay, that's cool. That was fun. So they okay, that's cool. Ice water challenge and thing. Okay, cool. I can get behind that 100%. But when you're telling me that you want an AI to be your therapist who has no idea what the hell you're even talking about, has no human emotion, it's scary. So,
Mhm.
like hats off, like I said, to the way you're doing it. I mean, I 100% think it's the way to go. Normally, I would have been the one to be like, well, I know she's been a little overbearing, but no, hell no. After all these things I'm seeing and all these things I started really paying attention to, and all these crazy things like these videos where it's like, if you take your life the next day, you know, all these text messages are coming. Okay,
Mhm.
so an actual psychotherapist and I had this conversation, Joy. Okay, so he told me in the conversation, unfortunately, when you get to a certain level in a suicidal thought process, if you're at that level, you're not listening to anybody else. But if you see that video and you're right on that edge, the scary fact is that you're going to push them over that edge because they're telling them basically, essentially, your life doesn't matter. And you being a mom of your daughter and all these, these are constant things you have to worry about. Are you
Mhm.
constantly like watching out for these kind of things?
Absolutely. Something that my dad taught and lived with us as kids raising us, and my mom's the same thing. My mom was less vocal. My dad was more vocal, but they
Hmm.
both were always united front and on the same page. And I'm very thankful for that. But because I'm the type of person, I will do my best to talk my way out of trouble as a kid. Like it's every kid tries, but I was good at debating. So I
Yeah.
could have tried that. But that's why my parents always said in front of each other, we can debate. When we're in our room at night after the kids have gone to bed, you can tell me if you differ in opinion. That's fine. But in front of the kids, we won't do that. So as much as I could have wanted to debate things and try to switch from because I was only homeschooled in high school. I
Hmm.
was thriving. I was salutatorian, valedictorian through junior high and 1,500 kids. And going into high school, I'm thinking, I got straight A's. Why are you punishing me? Why are you switching me to homeschool? And really, the reason was a week before my high school, and I grew up in a city that only had a Walmart originally. Okay, now it is a huge pass through city in California, and so it's huge now. That being said, I grew up in this city. And a week before I started high school, there was all over the news that someone had brought a gun to that school, and it was very high gang related. And so that being said, my parents had already met I had already met my teachers, gotten my books, gotten my schedule. I was ready to start school, and my parents said, "We're going to homeschool you." And I said, "I'm sorry, what? What did I do to deserve this? Why? Why? I get straight A's. Like, why are you punishing me?" And they knew how social I was and things like that. And they stayed united. The first year of homeschool was a lot of tears. My mom and I butted heads so much and oh my goodness. Honestly, I'm a big baby right now, but when I talk about this, I feel so bad because I'm a parent now, right? I know the other end. But 4 years later as I'm writing my college essays and things, I'm telling my dad, I have to write on something that changed my opinion of something and that opened my eyes about something in life. And he goes, "What about homeschool?" I said, "What about homeschool? That didn't change my opinion. I'm not homeschooling my kids." I said, "What are you talking about?" And my dad said, "Well, originally you didn't want to homeschool. A year and a half into this, you decided you could work and get more hours in than an average kid who has to get permission from their school. You started working, bought your first car, got your first phone, going, you finding the positive in something you didn't consider negative or that you considered negative. And you guys spent the whole first year, you and your mom butting heads because you're like, if I just make it terrible, maybe she'll let me go back to school." And I did do that. And I've apologized to her a couple different times since then because At year 4, writing those essays, my dad happened to mention, "Your mom's the one who wanted you to go back." And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" You said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, your mom fought me every night. Can we please just let her go back?" But I would come home at night. I would go in your room. I'd comfort you. Then I'd go in her room and comfort her because you both ended up crying every day, every night. And he'd get home at 8:30 at night. Come home to cold food, come comfort me, go comfort her, and then go to sleep and have to get up at 4 a.m. the next morning. And he'd do this every night for the first year. And I'm looking back at this like how little we know as a child and something
Mhm,
he taught as a young person with kids, he taught me if you don't teach your kids, someone else will.
mhm.
If you don't, someone else will. And what do you want them to teach them? And if you know what you want them to learn, do it yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to. So my kids, we have very open discussions. I know it sounds so silly and it goes against the norm and it goes against Christianity in general. Like the average Christian, you won't hear them talking about, sex and when you first start dating and narcissism or suicide rates or the talk, all of that stuff. You don't hear that stuff in Christianity. I will tell you because I was the guinea pig in Christian parenting. My parents were not saved until I was 11 years old. We didn't even know church prior to that. So I witnessed my 18-year-old sister move out of the house, and I was 11 at the time. We found the Lord, and I watched her go to dances. I watched her dye her hair, wear makeup, have boyfriends, do all these things. And as a family coming into knowing Christianity, my parents said no to everything. I don't know what to say. So since we don't know if it's right or wrong, we're just going to say no to you. But my older sister had yes to everything. So I had no. And I'm like, what did I do? So because there was no explanation of it, they were just trying to navigate learning how to live for the Lord and not knowing what was right and wrong. They witnessed good people in their life, pastors, and they became their best friend, and the other people in our life that were around their age, and they're witnessing them and how they were raised right and how their kids are growing up well and they wanted the same thing for their kids. So they just tried to imitate or mimic without any of the prior years of experience as Christianity, whereas those people were growing up in Christianity. And so they think, you know what? Just no to everything because they don't allow their kids to do it. So I consider myself the guinea pig in Christian parenting. So for me, I had a night and day difference from the first 11 years of my life and the the 7 years until I turned 18. Very different life. And I was okay with that. But my dad instilled the entire time if you don't teach them, someone else will. So come my kids, I'm starting to have kids and they're growing up and I'm getting close to school age. And I remember looking at my dad in the face and I said, Dad, I am not homeschooling. I'm not homeschooling. I will never do that to my kids. And then you get closer to having to put your kids in a public school somewhere and you're like, I don't want my kids around these other influences. I want to be my kid's biggest influence. And
Mhm.
so I made the decisions and I ate my words. I went back to my dad and he said, So what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to homeschool. And he said,
Yeah.
and he
No.
didn't nothing, just looked at me, smiled, literally nothing. There was no judgment. There was just, I know, babe. I know. And that's it. That's all that mattered because he knew I'd come around. He didn't have to push it either. He didn't have to push it. He just knew that he instilled what was right. He knew that the actions and how we were raised would stand on their own. And when we looked back and evaluated everything, he raised us with enough logic to say, when I evaluate everything, it is what was best for us. So maybe it's what's best for my kids. And you have to be willing to shift and change too with kids if it's not what's best. So if it wasn't what's best after I tried it a year or two, I had to change. And I did actually. I homeschooled them at first, realized I didn't know much as a homeschooling parent, having to actually teach my kids to literally read at kindergarten age. I ended up switching into a private school for a year and a half, gave my kids foundation, then switched back to homeschooling when COVID hit. So I had to be willing to adapt. And I think that's what Christians are lacking nowadays in their faith and in their stronghold to be what they think is what they have to stand firm on. They lack the ability to adapt and be okay with saying, you know what, I can be wrong. I can switch here. And then if it's not working there in a year or whatever, I switch back. I can do whatever I need to do. And that's what I think people are afraid to do and admit when
Yeah,
they're
no,
wrong.
I get that too. So, that I think that's really great. The philosophy on that, though. I mean, just the ability to admit that you're wrong. Okay, well, this didn't work. Let me try something else. And so far it's been great, though. I mean, I think it's the best decision you've made so far with the things that I've learned and the things that we're looking at. And it's funny you say that. Like your dad said, if you didn't teach them, somebody else will. Because that was a conversation me and my good friend Dr. Kristen had yesterday when we were interviewing. Me and her were catching up. We haven't seen each other in a year, so we were talking about that. She was like, like they don't even teach you basic math at home. Like
Mhm.
money, like how money works. It's like nobody teach you, and these days they don't teach you economics because I'm in Texas, and they have to star test and things like that. It's like they don't teach you these things anymore. And Dr. Chris and I were discussing that too. She's like, "Yeah, if no one would have taught me at home She's like, then I went to school and learned anything. I was already behind. Like, especially in economics, you figured at home they would have taught me, hey, this is the value of the dollar. These are the things. This is how money works. And you having these open conversations, I don't think you're wrong because teaching them emotional regulation at a young age is a really great idea. There's actually a book I want to suggest to you. It's called No More Monsters Under the Bed. It's
Mm,
written by Shannon Curtis. It teaches these young kids emotional regularity at a young age, but it's like in a children's book setting. So, maybe for the
yeah.
younger ones, it's a real great idea. She has a whole series that's coming out, though, that's going to address different subjects, but it's in a children's books format. And Shannon was a guest on the show, and she's actually a resident here in Texas with me, too. We were discussing it. I thought it was so interesting the way she went about it. She's like, it teaches you and it'll teach them emotional regularity, the things that you probably never learned before, but it just does it so easily digestible, which is great for these kids nowadays because I had a teacher. In fact, she's on TikTok. Another girl named Jessica Glow Up. She came on here and we were discussing about her. And she said that where she's at, she's actually in California with you too. She said that they're teaching these kids at fifth grade, like we're working on their identifying their emotions a little bit, which I thought was great because it's like, these kids need to learn now what these feelings are like and these things that we can start identifying some of these issues ahead of time and try and combat some of these numbers of things because there's nothing wrong with teaching these young guys and gals how to tell what's wrong, like these emotions, these feelings they're having because a lot of people don't. And then they're not sure what these feelings are. And you having the honest conversation, sex and all these other things, these are all normal topics. People like these were taboo for us when we were kids. I remember that conversation. Imagine having a conversation with your parents about sex at 18. You're sitting at the table and you think it's the most embarrassing thing ever, but it's like you're having the right conversation with them now. It's like, listen, I just want you to understand these are some things that you need to be aware of, especially with a young lady at 14, because you're teaching her, how to value herself as a woman and not let people identify her based on her sexuality because these people nowadays the image you get is these girls on TikTok and all these other places are all just like half naked and they're doing and it's like no, because now you're giving a wrong message to these young ladies. They can think that okay, my looks are the only thing that matters. And some of
Uh-huh.
these girls, like BPD, which is borderline personality sort of my girlfriend has, it's weird because she doesn't understand a lot of things. So like some stuff she'll listen to and like you have to explain certain things to her. And it's almost like, you have to explain why people are doing certain things. Sometimes she'll come in and look at me. It's like, well, listen, I don't understand the emotion of a lot of these things. So like I'm having to learn a new way to approach people and I apply it to now how I deal with people as well because it's so much easier because it makes sense like like how you say things, your tone of voice and all these other things are really great things that you can learn as you go, man. And like when you dig into it, oh man, it's some days are rougher than others. Like it's constant reassurance that I'm not going to leave and things like that and all that other stuff. And then I'm like, hey, listen, she's like, oh, do you really like me? And things like those kind of things that you don't think really matter to most
Mm.
people, and stuff like that too. So I did want to ask you though, Joy's husband actually used to be a soccer star. How did you guys meet? Because I'm so curious to hear how this happened.
So he actually went all the way out to Mexico. His parents let him drop out of his junior year of high school here in California, move all the way to Mexico by himself with, he's got grandmas, aunts, and things like
Yeah.
that out there. But ultimately at 17, he got to go out there and he was in semi-pro soccer. His goal was end game Chivas. He wanted to play for the Chivas.
Hmm.
But if you guys know anything about Mexican soccer, they think you're too old after 18. So once you turn 18, if they haven't already scouted you, you're too old for them. So he went out there to make a last ditch effort before he got of age. And so he went out there and he ended up with an agent and was going through all the routes, going through all the trainings, getting things going, and coming up on the time frame where you could basically meet and greet all of the people to be able to get your name out there with all these scouts and stuff like that. The agent that he had went MIA. We don't still to this day we don't know what happened of him, where he's at, or what. But in Mexico, in order to be released from one agent to go to another, to be able to get into those meet and greets for them to get you in there, you have to release your agent, and your agent has to release you. You have to have proof of both ends. And so, because he was MIA, he couldn't get that. He missed all the meet and greets, and he ended up having to come back home to California. He turned 18 during that time, and he will tell it like greatest loss of my life. I'm like, you can say that for now until you lose me or the kids. But but in the meantime, that brought him back here and he didn't know what to do when he came back. So he just kind of hung out at a loss a little bit, what to do. And a few months later, he and I met online. I had just come back from college in
Okay.
Arizona. So, because I came back from college in Arizona, I came back to living with my parents for just a short time, only a couple months. And while I was with them, I remember feeling so alone because I just came from being around everyone my age at college, came back
Mhm.
home to California, and I was at a church where I was the only one around my age. There was a ton of kids younger than me and a ton of adults older than me. And I went back to working. I worked for the US government at the time, and I worked around all of married adults. And so I'm sitting here at, 19, 20 years old, and I'm like, I've got no one to hang out with, no one to bounce ideas off of, no one to go, let off steam with. And I remember crying to my dad one day, like, Dad, I love you all, but I need someone my age around close by. And he's like, well, pray about it. Just pray about it. And I'm like, it sounds so stupid, but as a kid, it sounds so dumb. It is the Christian way, pray about it, right? But
Mhm.
in my head, I'm like, what's he gonna do about it? You just want to know the end game already, right?
Yeah.
So I did. I was praying about it, going about life, not changing anything. But this was in the time of MySpace. So I went online, I was,
Okay. Yeah.
looking around, and I ended up meeting my husband through one of the side, ads on MySpace. And went over there, and sure enough, we got a conversation going, and we decided to go meet up in San Francisco one day. So we met in San Francisco in the middle of a storm, and this was at the time where I had a cell phone and he didn't, because not everybody did. And so we scheduled exactly on GPS where to meet across from the BART station, etc. I'll be waiting under that sign. And it rained for hours, and this man got caught in traffic. And I was in the rain for 3 hours waiting for him because if I left that sign, he might not see me. And so in the rain, I waited there with people driving by, and then an hour later, driving by again, stopping the car and saying, do you need a ride somewhere? And I'm like, I'm good. So I waited 3 hours, didn't know if he was going to show. And then he showed up, and I was shivering and wet like a cat. And I'm like, well, and so I went home. We went to the mall and did our whole thing. And at the day I left I texted my cousin from that date heading home on BART. And I said, you can save this text and read it at my wedding because I'm going to marry this guy. So I knew. But anyway, that's how we met. And I don't condone or tell people they should meet people online, but I tell them there are exceptions to the rule and it worked for us. So yeah.
Yeah, be safe. Be safe about it because like we go back to the Megan's Missing thing where people were showing this movie to their kids. Oh, well, this
Mhm.
is one. Like, yeah, obviously use common sense when you're meeting people. Know that who your person you're meeting. Pick a public setting, kind of thing. Like it's different. People understand. They didn't grow up in the '90s. Didn't understand. Like it was different for us, and the commercials were different. The TV shows were different. Now they
Yes.
censor everything. Back then, dude, we didn't have anything censored. It's like, God, those Jack in the Box commercials from the '90s were just horrible.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, "Jesus, you're getting away with a lot of things there, Jack." And things like that. And then the TV shows and the feel for everything, Beavis and Butthead were big, all these things we didn't think about back then because it was a whole nother thing, and it's interesting to hear that you met him online through an app. You got him through an ad on MySpace. That's so funny to hear. That's how you guys met.
Yeah. Yep.
That-
16 years
that-
later, I'm telling my kids, you're not getting on social media. So it's just
I
not the
mean,
right age, not the right time.
yeah, yeah, you're right though. I mean, because like we said, the internet's a scary place to be in nowadays, especially nowadays, man. You don't know what the hell's going on with these people. Like I said, me and my one of my family from my TikTok family this morning, we're having an issue. This guy, he's been stalking this poor woman. He's like saying these horrible things, like I can find you, and I'm like, it's vice versa, bud. We can find you too. Trust me. There's a couple clicks it takes, and you can be found anywhere these days. You think you can hide your shit? You can't. The dark web's a scary place to go to and things like that. These things that we didn't know existed back in the '90s. Like we had only internet access with MySpace, and MySpace was still big to us. I mean, damn, I remember MySpace. We used to code our pages and have the music, and our kids are looking at us like, "Oh, really? That's cool." I'm like, "It's essentially what you're doing now. What do you mean?" We
Yep.
didn't have as much
Same
video
thing.
access, damn it. We had to make these posts and these photos. We had photos back then. Still imagery was still big for us. Like some of these cartoons you see nowadays, let me tell you, you're taking a little bit for granted here because we are the originators of where these cartoons came from, damn it. Okay. A lot of ours used to be hand drawn. Now you got everything so digital. It's like, it's
Yeah.
insane what you could do with AI and all these things these days, and it's like these kids take everything for granted. It's like, where do you think a lot of this stuff came? Like my kids playing like the King of Hearts series and the what Disney game where they made like, the kind of like role playing kind of thing where they're gonna go around and you run around the Disney characters. She's like, "Are these mind controls or something?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "You realize you're playing a game that like when it came out was revolutionary. Disney have never made anything like this." And whatever, Dad. I don't get like you're trying to explain the
Mhm.
history behind these things. It's because she's a big gamer. So like I let her play a lot of the games and she lives with her mom. And we never had a really great relationship. You've already know most of this stuff because you've listened to some of the episodes and things like that and heard a lot of the stories. But this was funny because I like she gets on there and she's like, "Yeah, I'm playing this game now." I hate this thing. And I'm like, yeah, well, you got to understand, like this game when it came out, like this was the groundbreaking thing. Disney's never done these things before. Well, okay, yeah, but the buttons, and it's just funny to listen to him complain. I'm like, yeah, you have no idea, man. You had never lasted in a Nintendo generation with us. The two buttons, you didn't have 15 buttons. You had two buttons. That was it.
Yep.
Even the little stadium bench pad, they had this sad pad that you're down there trying to run. You're trying to race the computer. And it's like you're never going to win this game, and so it gets funny. Joey, we're at that all important part of the episode where we ask the two questions, and you know which questions are coming.
Yes.
Oh, if your mental health had a song, what would you say your song would be?
So I was split between three, but this is my indecision. I know it sounds funny because I don't know the original singer, but the version I like is by Alicia Becker. It's
Hmm.
called "Your Ways Are Higher Than Mine," and ultimately, it's a long lesson. Life is a long lesson in learning that no matter what you think or think you know, everything's going to be done the way that God wants, and He's going to have it done in His time. He's never late, always on time, even if we think He's late. But at the end of the day, His ways are always higher. So He may give you the result you want, and He may not. But either way, it's going to be better for you than what you thought.
Yeah. When I broke mine down originally, my original songs were when my anxiety was the opening of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I know the band now. I can't think of the band name now. It goes blank because normally I can pull up music left and right. Music is a massive part of my life. When I was my brother was younger, he used to have that massive CD collection. Back in the day, I'm aging myself now. Everybody's listening to this. We're aging ourselves. Back when CDs were big and everything else, the original song was that one, and then my depression song was "Leave the Light On, Talk About the Dark" by Papa Roach. It's a very powerful song because if you watch the end of the music video, 98 comes up as the thing on the end of it. And a lot of people don't realize, 98 is like a universal number. It's just not that. It's just a crisis line in general. Like if you're ever in need, things like that too. Another great resource for you too, Joy, would be the helphub.co. You being religious and everything too, and all that kind of things. It's actually Lisa Sugarman has made this site for you that if you ever run into some of those situations, you're not trying to do like religion or your ethnicity. A lot of different groups don't like certain things. She had taken the time to compile all this stuff for you, so you can go into this site and click on every single thing that fits into your category, and she has all the information that would fit into what would fill in that category for you. So if you
Mhm.
ever know somebody or you run into somebody that may need help, like I said, 98 is always a great resource. Like, me and another woman in another interview I did with on her show, she was trying to debate that 98 wasn't as effective, but someone went and looked at the statistics and said that there was a 85% of people that use 98, it saved a lot of lives because people don't realize that these guys are trained. So if you ever run into one of these situations, and anybody listening, this is the same thing too. 98 is a great resource for that reason. Like anybody's like having these suicidal thoughts and things like that too, some things you can do is call 98, have them on the phone with you and pass them off because you're not doing anything wrong by getting to somebody that's, because that conversation is very tough, and especially when
Mhm.
it comes to the young age and things like that. I know it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about, and stuff like that too. So, we want to make sure you're better equipped with everything that you can have because, you're out there doing your thing as always. If you ever run into one of those situations, it's always great to suggest that to people, and that's what it's for. It's not even just for the suicide hotline. That's what they used to call it, but it's a crisis line basically. These guys are trained to handle these things. So if you ever run into one of those problems or somebody's just message you things that are really worrying you and you're concerned, hey, listen, my good friend Pete told me, 98 is a great option for you if you need it. It feels like this falls into that category. Unfortunately, I can listen to so much you're saying, but I think that you need to go talk to somebody. And it's a great thing to know and a great thing for everybody to know and things like that too, because a lot of people use it and people don't even realize it. And it's the problem is that we shame a lot of people when they hear these things because they look at you weird. They're like, oh, I don't want to upset them and say something to them. I'm like, but you don't realize is that it takes a lot more than you realize. And then a lot of times it's the question always comes up, well, what could I have done more? Sometimes you couldn't do anything. And unfortunately, that's the scary part about the whole thing is that a lot of times you can't help some of these people. Like, you want to help everybody, but you can't. And
Right.
then grief's another one too to teach the kids as well. And there's a really great one. I got to find the book name for you, but it's Milton and the Magic Star. I think it's called. My therapist actually wrote a book. She's a six-time international bestseller. I think it's called Milton and the Magic Star. If I remember the correct, I'll have to find the name for you. But it's another one that teaches them about like death and. But it's in a children's book setting that maybe you could check out and see what you think about using it with the kids and especially the younger ones and show it to them. Obviously you go through to prove this first, but it's the way it presents it to kids. And maybe it's easier way for you to talk to someone because I know you have open conversations with them. Sometimes it's easier for them to, understand it in that kind of format. So maybe that's a great tool for you too, since you do homeschool them. hey,
Perfect.
listen, we'll check out this book and see what you think, stuff like that. But Joy, I wanted to thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed having you here. Like I said, I want to say thank you from everybody that struggles with mental health every day, that you don't realize that your kind act could save somebody's life. You really could. Like, you don't realize that you are the positive moment in someone's life that could be that turning point that saves them, and you don't even realize it. And it's not even that you need to know it. You just keep doing you. So I got to say, at the end of the day, just keep doing what you're doing. I always love it. I love the positivity. I love the support that you give me every time I come in. And I always send somebody to go say, hey, listen, have you met my friend Joy yet? And I always send them your way. I'm like, listen, go tell her that Pete for Anxiety sent you in there, and she'll get you connected to some really great people there. Like Marin, that's how me and Marin met. Now
That's
Marin's my student of podcasting now. I teach her everything I know. I send her new guests and she finds new guests and she's sending people my way, and things like that too. So, I know this is your first step in podcasting, being a guest. So, what did you think so far?
I loved it. It sounds like all the work's on your side, so being a guest is more my thing, but I definitely enjoyed it. It's just having a conversation and allowing that conversation to be heard by many. That's a great thing. A great thing.
Well, Joy, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence in the studio. I know it sounds pretty messed up, but it's really was. It really was a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better. Keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, the way you're teaching these guys and things like that. If I come across anything else helpful, I do have your contact information and everything like that. I can pass on some stuff to you, like, hey, Joy, I found some really great. What do you think about this? And then hand it off to you and let you decide, since you're making great decisions already. Say, okay, well, maybe I'll add this in. Like I said, Shannon Curtis's book series. I'll let you know when she starts releasing more. She's actually going to be a returning guest when the next book comes out and things like that too. So I'll get a preview of what it's about, and then I'll reach out to you, like, hey, Joy, listen, this is a new book, this is the topic, and she's going to cover all these different topics in this children's book series, and things like that too. And I'll just keep sending you some information. That way, you can keep in the loop of things and see if you want to use it and apply it in your school studies for the kids and stuff like that. But,
Perfect.
from the bottom of our heart, of everybody in the mental health community, again, thank you so much for what you do. You don't realize that, that energy, that positivity, that overflowing, kindness that you do could save somebody's life, really could. So, Joy, as we get ready to sign off, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Absolutely. I obviously am on TikTok under Joy's Family BBQ, short for barbecue. And then also, we're going over to the other app, Epic. So over there, I'm under the same name, Joy's Family BBQ. So look forward to seeing you guys.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here today. It was such a great pleasure having you. And like I, always say, is there anything you want to say before we start signing off this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety?
I just want to say thank you to you because what you're doing is a great work and you're reaching many more souls than someone like me could meet. We don't realize how many people that each person can meet that none of us can. And so you're reaching more ears and eyes than you think as well. And so I just want to thank you. That's why it's so easy to send people your way. So thank you for opening up the conversation in general and then digging a little deeper. Appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, guys. And with that being said, we're going to wrap this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety, guys. You know where to find me at Pete vs. Anxiety. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. I'm on X all the way down to TikTok. And as always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could say so that hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health?